Hello and welcome to Marriage Matters. I'm Dr. Mark.
And I'm Liz. We're your marriage and communication coaches, here to inspire, instill hope, and empower you to weather the challenges of married life.
Today's guest is not only an extraordinary attorney, he's a good friend, he's an Eagle Scout, and he has lived his life with a lot of the lessons of leadership that came from that. And he's also an absolutely extraordinary wealth of knowledge as a historian on the Battle of Gettysburg. Welcome to the show, John.
Well, thank you for having me.
We're excited to have you. So we always like to start every show like this by asking you to just tell us a little bit about you and your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. I first started off after law school in the Bucks County District Attorney's Office, and in 2005 I left there, went into private practice, and I was suddenly confronted with so many friends and family and other colleagues and clients who were coming in and they had not properly prepared for the other stages of life when things go wrong. And there were so many instances of spouses who didn't know how they were going to move on, how they were going to be able to financially afford things now that their loved one had passed. Or children who now didn't have parents because they had passed away, and now they don't know where they're going to go. And they don't know who's going to be watching after them, and they have to deal with that along with their grief. And I just found that the law was so reactionary. We, as attorneys, we sit around and we wait for something bad to happen. And I thought there's got to be a better way. And so I started taking a proactive approach to things and trying to help people plan for the next stages now while there's time to get things right.
Well, we absolutely love that. And everybody who's watching the show, just be prepared. You're going to learn a lot of stuff from this intelligent, wonderful person sitting next to me.
John, again, a wealth of knowledge. Last year, something that we never would have really imagined actually came to fruition. It's happened before, but not to us, and COVID struck. And it really has taught us so many lessons. Lessons about ourselves, about society, about people. But one of the lessons, I think, as you just pointed out, is that we must be prepared. The old Boy Scout model.
Yes.
Be prepared. And we must be proactive to be prepared rather than reactive, as you said. So across your years of practice, how critical is it to actually have that prior planning? And in what areas in planning for the next stages in life, because we all have those, but sometimes they come sooner than we think. At what stages and how critical is that prior planning?
It's very important, and now more so than ever. Before the pandemic, I would get people to come in the office and say, I've always thought about doing estate planning, but I don't like to think about death, and I figured I'd be able to do it next year. And now that the pandemic has come and starting to go away, we're starting to realize that health is not assured, that tomorrow is not a given. And so many people are now rushing in to do estate planning, which tells me that people are realizing that this really is important.
Wow. So, okay, so when they come into you and they're realizing that it's important, you mentioned earlier just some different kind of scenarios that sometimes it's children who their parents have died and they have to figure stuff out. Are you talking, when you were saying that, are you talking young kids? Or are you talking teenagers who've had to kind of figure out what to do with their parents' money and go forward, and you are the one sitting there explaining that to them?
Well, both. You have the young kids that they don't know where they're going to go.
Yeah.
You have the older kids that maybe they're going to inherit a lot of money from an insurance policy that their parents had. And their parents did the right thing. They went out and they got an insurance policy, but then they didn't think, what comes next? They didn't think, okay, what happens when this money actually reaches the child? Mm-hmm. What are they going to do with it? We had one individual, and he received a rather large sum, and he spent it all in 3 months, and it was gone. Wow. There was no plan put together as to how we're going to preserve this money once it gets to the children, because so few parents actually talk to their kids anymore about their values of money and what to do with the money, how to save the money, and make sure that it's going to be there for the rainy day.
It's really amazing because there are so many issues with money. People attach meaning to money outside of its intrinsic value. People seem to hold that, and it's just they don't teach. Or you have some people who have come into a lot of money, but they don't know how to deal with it themselves, so they don't know how to pass it on to their children. And there are so many potential issues in that. As we look at planning, when we think about powers of attorney, and that can hit in all sorts of levels. As you look at powers of attorney, and where do you start to advise people to get a power of attorney? Because I know an experience that I had up in Maine when I was in my late 30s, and I probably needed one, and thank goodness I could get it, or I couldn't have closed on a home. And happy to share that story.
You should share that story.
Okay, well, we were about to close on a home. I got sick. I scraped my leg. I wound up in the intensive care unit the morning of the day before closing. And I was literally critically ill on death's door, and I could not attend the closing. And here I am in my late 30s, 2 kids, a house that's supposed to be closed. I need to sign on it because otherwise I can't go. And my wife doesn't have a power of attorney to actually sign for me. Nobody does. And I can't attend. So all of a sudden, thank goodness, I was at a point at which, A, we could get an attorney in, but we just sort of in the nick of time, because much longer and I wouldn't have been able to make a cogent decision, and therefore I couldn't have signed any papers. So, there have got to be other people like me, and we think we're invincible up to a certain point when we start to realize we're not, and that was the case.
Well, and not only that, I would have thought that Wendy would have been able to sign something for you as your wife. So there's some confusion there too. I would have thought that. I guess that's not true.
Well, that's correct. And as a spouse, you can go and sign for your other spouse, but a lot of institutions, financial institutions, they want to see proof that you have the authority to do what you're saying you can do. And that's where the power of attorney is going to come in. You can get a power of attorney, and it is good for not only if you're, maybe sick or something's going wrong, but maybe if you just can't handle something. So we had one client who, he moved to Canada. He had a home here. Pandemic comes. He can't cross the border. He wants to sell the house. He's perfectly fine. He's not sick or anything, but he had the power of attorney. The power of attorney was here in Pennsylvania, and now they were able to go and do the transaction for him, make sure that the money got to the right spot, and he didn't have to worry about it. Other people, if you become sick, the power of attorney is there to make sure that maybe you can move some assets around to protect them or to free them up or to get the bills paid. Or if you're going to be traveling somewhere, you can get the car sold and get life taken care of.
So isn't that just in a will? I'm literally, my brain is spinning, and I'm thinking, do I have power of attorney with my husband? Isn't that in a will? Would that?
No.
No.
You want to have 3 specific documents if you want to plan right, and there's a 4th one we can talk about later. But you want to have a will, and the will is only going to be valid upon death. Until you die, it has no power whatsoever. But what it does is it makes sure that all of your property is passed on to the next generation. It's going to name who is going to be speaking on your behalf. You can appoint a guardian for your children so that if you're gone, your spouse is also gone. Everyone now knows where the children are going to go, who's going to have authority to watch over the children, who's going to be able to make medical decisions for the children. So that is your will. The next document would be a living will, and that is going to allow someone to make a medical decision for you if you can't do it yourself. And then the 3rd document is the power of attorney we were just speaking about, and that is going to allow someone to have the ability to have custody and control of real estate, personal property, and finances, and make decisions with those. Now, those last 2 documents, the living will and the power of attorney, they are valid in life. And so they can make things a lot easier for you while you're alive, but when you die, they will lose their power in favor of the will. So 3 specific documents, but they don't all become active at the same time.
Go ahead.
So then when do you recommend somebody coming to you to start to create all this?
Right now. Because you don't know when you're going to get sick.
Right.
When are you going to die? Name the day. You don't know.
Right.
You don't know when you're going to be in a car accident. You don't know when a border is going to close and you can't cross it to handle things because of a pandemic. So the sooner you put something in place, the better you're going to be overall. So we recommend that people take care of these things right now, and then they know, hey, if property is going to pass to my children, who's going to watch over it? When are they going to actually receive the property? You don't want the children to just receive it as soon as you go. What if they're 5? What if they're 8? And they're left with all this insurance money? you want to make sure that that's all taken care of, and these documents will allow you to do that.
You know, it's really important, I think, and I've run into this in the hospital, in the ICUs, where there is confusion, I guess, between what a living will is and what a medical power of attorney is. And obviously, you know, maybe we could expand upon that into durable and financial limited power of attorneys, but specifically that living will versus the medical power of attorney, what are the differences there so that people understand that they're really two different things?
Well, in essence, they're really almost the same thing, and you can combine them into one.
Okay.
This document is going to allow someone to make a medical decision for you. Only if you can't do it yourself. There's a lot of confusion. People think, oh, someone's going to, turn the machines off on me, and I don't want. No, you're going to specify exactly what you would like to have happen, and then if you cannot communicate with the doctor, then this document gives someone the ability to make a decision for you consistent with your beliefs. So we had a situation where a family came on in. They were very upset. Their loved one was in the hospital. They were on life support. The hospital said that there's no hope. We recommend turning the machines off. And I said, well, why are you here? And they said, well, we don't want to turn the machines off. Well, why don't you want to turn the machines off? And they said, well, our relative, they have this medical power of attorney, and they wanted to be kept alive as long as humanly possible because of their religious beliefs. And so I looked at the document, and the document spelled it out very carefully. They wanted every single measure taken to keep them alive as long as possible. And I said, well, does the hospital know about this? Yes. Have they turned the machines off? No. I said, well, then there's nothing to do. The document's doing exactly what this person wanted. So a living will is going to end life as well as preserve life consistent with your individual beliefs.
Wow.
If something falls off of the construct that was laid out by Mrs. Smith, who's now on that life support, does the living will, or by default a medical power of attorney, or again, are they the same? And do they actually which one allows someone to make decisions in the best interest of the patient, the human being that wrote the document, when it's not explicitly laid out there? Does the living will do that, or?
They both do.
Okay.
So the living will is going to allow someone to make a medical decision, and the power of attorney is going to allow someone to make a financial decision. And you can cross-reference those so they can be different people, so you can have checks and balances.
Okay, well, we have to go to commercial break, but there's going to be so much more that you're going to learn on the back half from John Benson. We're so happy to have you here.
Boardwalks built for fun. Legendary rock and roll clubs.
This is how we do it. Hip hip hop.
Casinos by the ocean.
Hip hip hop.
Now that's New Jersey. 130 miles of beautiful beaches. Solid rock. And everything in between.
Look in the window.
Now that's New Jersey.
Hello and welcome back to Marriage Matters. Before the break, we were talking with John Benson, an exceptional attorney, about powers of attorney and living wills and why we need to plan ahead of time because we don't know what life brings us.
So let's bring it back to power of attorney. Mark and I are both powers of attorney of our own mothers, and I can tell you I did not have a big understanding of what that role and responsibility was until some things came up and I had to learn it. So can you explain a little bit about what the duties and responsibilities are when somebody is asked or all of a sudden given power of attorney?
Well, quite simply, your duty is to act in the best interest of the person who has given you those powers. That is the standard that you're going to be judged by. So a power of attorney will allow someone to do something if you tell them to do it. So buy this, sell that, do this, do that. But they can also act if they understand what the reasonable expectations are of the individual. So if you know what the reasonable expectations are of the person who's given you the power, even if you disagree with those reasonable expectations, you are empowered to try and bring those expectations to fruition. So I always give the example, you always gave money to a particular charity. Maybe it was a charity I always call, Save the Whales. and the person who received the power of attorney, they don't like whales. It doesn't matter. The person who gave the power, it was their reasonable expectation that this charity would always receive money. So if you become incapacitated, the person who has the power of attorney, even if they disagree, they are expected to write a check in your account for that charity each year because it was your reasonable expectation that they would receive it. No matter what, the standard will be whatever action you take, it has to be in the best interest of the person who gave you those powers.
And when somebody comes in to see you, do you have sort of an information sheet that you leave them with so they kind of can follow certain instructions? And because there's a lot there.
Well, there is, and we try and be very respectful of the person who is creating the document. Not in every case do they want people to know that they've received a power of attorney. Yeah. They say, I want this, but only if something bad happens. So I'm not going to tell the power of attorney that they have the powers yet, but here's the document. John, if something happens to me, I want you to give them a call, make sure that they know what to do. Here is the instruction booklet. We usually will have them fill out a sheet that has an inventory of all the assets so they know exactly where the assets are, what the banks to go to are, so that there's no confusion that if you're asked to do something, you know what to do and how to do it.
So if that person then gets the call from you, I would have to imagine that they'd be maybe surprised, not necessarily, but have you ever had somebody that was really surprised and you had to sort of walk them through that?
Well, not really. I mean, you're usually going to pick someone that you really trust to begin with. And so they're usually not too surprised. And it's only a very small portion of the people that ever don't tell the person that they have the power of attorney. Usually they will tell them. Usually we will have them fill out a form that indicates that they understand what the powers are that have been given to them and that they promise to execute it in the other person's best interest. And they'll even sign that document and have it notarized. So they usually will know that they've been given the power. They will usually be given a copy of the power of attorney so they can see exactly what the powers are, and they know to contact us if they have any questions so that we can help guide them consistent with the individual's beliefs.
That's fantastic.
So one more question. I have so many questions. So do you recommend when a person has power of attorney or is given power of attorney, do they then in turn need to have, if they're the fiduciary and they're the trustee, do they in turn need to have a lawyer to protect themselves just because?
They usually don't.
Okay.
I mean, they can if they want. It depends on how protective they want to be. But usually the document spells out everything very carefully.
Okay.
We have notes in the file as to things that we've learned about the client over the years, and what their beliefs are, what their interests are, what their philosophies are, and we're there to help guide them. But usually they don't have to do too many things. They might have to sell one thing or buy another. But usually they know the person who gave them the power. They understand who they are, what their philosophies are, so they usually don't need a whole lot of guidance.
Do you ever come across somebody who decided to have one or two, like more than one power of attorney? And what is that like?
Yes, there's lots of people that will come in and they'll say, I want both my sons to be power of attorney, or I want both of these friends. I don't recommend it. I usually recommend just one person hold a duty at a time, because if the two people you've appointed disagree for some reason, the courts have a hard time figuring out exactly who to listen to because they have equal powers. And so I say, the power of attorney or the person who's the executor or handling the will, they can talk to everyone and get some input, but at the end of the day, I think you want one clear voice to speak for you.
That was so critical in the ICU again, because when there are people you have different family members, different views, and you have something that's there that the patient said, and we know what that was, and it becomes very, very challenging. And then courts get involved, and the patient languishes.
Right.
And we had a approach to medicine, which is what we're doing trying to preserve life, or are we prolonging death?
Right.
And at the point at which it switches, that's when that living will has to, be brought back. I want to just turn for a minute. Liz said something about trustee, and we talked before about trusts and wills and making sure you're set up so you know where your kids are going, how the money's being distributed. There are people out there who say, well, I have that. I already have a will. What is your counsel to your clients and new clients of when they should be revisiting those wills, the trusts, the estate planning?
I want to clarify, you're mentioning a trust. we usually, when we build a will, we'll build a trust into it.
Okay.
And that trust, I call it a springing trust. If you should pass away and you're leaving something to children, and those children are below a particular age that you think is appropriate to make good financial decisions, the trust will spring out of the will and it will hold everything that you've left for those children until they get old enough to make good decisions. And there'll be a trustee to watch over it. You can also have a separate standalone trust. And maybe you'll have that so that instead of naming your children as a beneficiary in your life insurance, you'll name the trust as the beneficiary, so that when you pass away, all of that money from the life insurance is going to go into this trust. And again, someone is going to watch over it until the children are old enough to make good decisions on their own, and then they can receive their inheritance. You mentioned about the will. You know, when should you look at it? So many people, they create the will and that's it. They throw it in the safe and they say, that's it. Things change. Yeah, family dynamics change. So what I tell people is, if we were to sell all of your assets, we probably have enough money to buy maybe a Ferrari. Now, some people will buy a Ferrari and they'll never drive it. They'll put it in their garage and they'll say, that's my investment. I don't want anything to happen to the car. I don't want the paint to chip or anything. And they'll close the door. And 10 years will go by and they're ready to sell the car. And they'll open up the garage door and there's the car. And the paint is pristine under a layer of dust. And they'll get in the car to bring it on out to sell it, and the car doesn't start. The hoses have cracked, the gas went bad, the tires are flat, the car wasn't maintained. So I tell everyone, take 2 minutes out of your entire year, just 2 minutes. Pull the will out, pull the power of attorney out, pull the living will out, look at them real quick to make sure the decisions that you made in 2021 are still valid. Do I still trust this person to make good decisions? Am I still comfortable with this person watching after my children? If you're not comfortable with something, that's the time to do it. If you are comfortable with everything, you put the Ferrari back in the garage, you close the door, it's ready to go. You've maintained the will, you've maintained the living will. It's ready to go for you. So it's not just do it once and forget it. It's take 2 minutes every year and actually go and maintain it. So what we do is we actually contact the client, and we contact them once a year, usually in the summertime, and we say, hey, do we need to do anything? And it forces them to pull that document out, and it takes just 2 minutes. And then they put it back in, and they're fine.
I think that's genius. And what's going through my head right now, again, I keep thinking of myself and what I need to do when I get home. But I'm now thinking, so my oldest is 20, my second one is 18, my youngest is 17. So if, God forbid, my husband and I just passed away, the person that was named in that document originally as the trustee, would they still be that person, or would it be my oldest because he's 20 now?
Well, it depends on how you've named him. Usually we'll name a trustee, and then if something should happen to him, we'll name a backup trustee. And as time goes by, maybe you aren't comfortable with the people you've named. Maybe one of the trustees was your oldest child, and maybe you want it to be someone different because they're making some poor financial decisions now, or they're having some trouble in their life. So you can switch it however you want.
Wow. Okay. So I hope everybody's really listening to this, because I am learning so much. So I have to imagine everybody's going to learn so much. So, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the kids and the trust and moving in and sort of guiding it. Do you ever set up trust so that there's sort of stepwise assets? That you have $500,000, and when you're 18, you get $5,000 of it. And when you're 25, you get,
Yes.
So that type of thing. And is that common, or is that something that most people come in and ask for, or is?
That's something we always recommend, and I would say probably about 95% of our clients actually do that. So they'll break it into 2 or 3 distributions. They'll receive some when they're 21. They'll receive another group at 25, another group at 30, or you can spread the ages out however you want. But then to make sure that if the child should happen to make a poor decision with the money, there's something coming down later on that they can count on to get them by. Now, the money's always going to be available to them if they have any of the necessities of life. So food, clothing, shelter, education, those are automatic. Everything else is at the discretion of the trustee. So, if the child comes to the trustee and says, I need a car to get to work and to get to school, the trustee's there to say, I think your parents would have thought that was a good use of the money. but you're picking a BMW, and maybe that's not the smartest decision for a 21-year-old. Let's get you a safer car, let's get you a more affordable car, and then once you get your inheritance, you can buy all the BMWs you want.
Okay, love this. So
Fantastic.
we're coming to the end of the show, and what we want to ask you is what, excuse me, what is one thing? I mean, you've given so many nuggets of really quality stuff that people are gonna take home, hopefully, and at least look at their will. But what is one thing that you would like to leave the audience with today?
To act now, to take just a few minutes, get these documents in place, think about what you would like to have done, and then maintain it every year. So what I like to tell people is, it really, in the amount of time that it takes to figure these things out and to execute the documents, you have an hour or two. An hour or two of work right now will give you a lifetime of sleep.
Oh, that's absolutely
Love that.
beautiful. Yeah, wow. That is actually a pure nugget of just life.
Yes.
Not just your legal documents, preparing, and as John said, we have no idea. We have no stamp. As a physician, I've looked all over many bodies. I've never seen an expiration date. I have no idea, and neither does anyone else. The fact of the matter is that we don't know. And prepare, plan. Make your life easier. Find the expert like John. Find the expert who's not only incredibly knowledgeable, but has the passion to serve and to care for you the way that John and his team do. That's extraordinary.
So, John, tell everybody how they can find you.
Well, we are right in Doylestown, Bucks County, Pennsylvania. They can contact us at either 215-348-4416, or you can find us on the website at penglaseandbenson.com.
Well, as usual, we are so grateful for our guest. You have brought a wealth of information
Thank you for having
to
me.
everyone.
Thank you for being here.
For our audience, thank you once again for joining us. We look forward to being with you every week and to sharing things that help in your marriage and your family. We're grateful. We are also grateful for the incredible emails that you send us that let us know some of the things that you would like to see or if you'd like to be a guest. Reach out to us and email us at marriagemattershosts@gmail.com, or you can find us on our website at twinlightscoaching.com. Until next week, have an absolutely extraordinary day.
Bye.